Welcome to this 8th edition of CenterView, our monthly virtual discussion series sponsored by Baltimore's oldest and preeminent business networking and dining club, the Center Club. Our aim is to feature the people and the issues impacting our present, shaping our future, as well as the movers and doers, as it were, from across our region who are creating momentum and making a positive difference. I'm your host, Greg Tucker, a Baltimore City resident and a board member of the Center Club, a Baltimore City resident since 1997. I'm an independent strategic communications advisor based here in Baltimore. But enough about me. Today, we're delighted to have the opportunity to welcome Terri Lee Freeman, the new executive director of the Reginald F. Lewis Museum of Maryland African American History and Culture, a position she just took up last week. Terri, however, is no stranger to our area. She's a graduate of Howard University in Washington, a permanent resident of Columbia, Maryland. Terri has just concluded her 6-year tenure at the National Civil Rights Museum, located, of course, in the Lorraine Hotel in Memphis, the site of Martin Luther King Jr.'s assassination in 1968. There she placed great emphasis on building the organization's reputation as a new public square, a place where people from across the globe would gather to discuss and protest even difficult issues, celebrate triumphs of the movement, and honor Dr. King and his enduring legacy, something I know she intends to promote at the Reginald F. Lewis Museum. Worth noting is that Terri is married to Dr. Boyer G. Freeman, who is the senior pastor of New St. Mark Baptist Church in Baltimore's Gwynn Oak community and a member of the City Housing Authority's Board of Commissioners. Together, they've raised 3 daughters in Columbia and are the proud parents of 3 wonderful grandchildren. Terri, welcome. We're thrilled to have you back in Baltimore and at the helm of the Reginald F. Lewis Museum, a place that will certainly benefit from your vision and extensive experience from the National Civil Rights Museum. Thank you.
Thank you. Thanks for having me. I'm happy to be here.
Well, listen, so give us the backstory here. You're an iconic museum that, of course, that is so closely tied, tragically, but to Dr. King. But of course, as you said, you made it a place where people can a public square, as it were. What precipitated this big career move, and what brings you back?
Well, 2020 was quite the year for everyone, I think. The National Civil Rights Museum, not unlike so many organizations, was kind of ticking along, as was I. And then on January 15th of 2020, I was in a pretty bad car accident, and someone broadsided me, ran through a light, broadsided me, broke my knee, broke my ankle. And from January 15th, I was no longer able to walk I had a 12-week recuperation. So when everybody else started to work remotely, I had been working remotely since mid-January. And in March, when COVID closed down the museum, had to shut the museum down for 3 months, reopened in July. Unfortunately, we had to furlough some people. And so it was kind of this rolling bad news cycle. And then toward the end of the summer, my mom, who had moved to Memphis with us, she passed. And it was, this was all on the heels of the fact that over the past 6 years, my husband and I had been really in a commuter marriage, because he was here in Baltimore and he would come to Memphis every week and then come back to Baltimore on the weekends. And it was just the combination of all of these events that said, now is probably a good time. Museum is in a great place. And I was fortunate enough to get a call from the Reginald F. Lewis Museum. And I thought, this is absolutely perfect, because I get to continue to do this great work at another great institution. In the community that I've called home for so many, many years. And it allowed me to kind of close out what was a wonderful, wonderful 6-year tenure at the National Civil Rights Museum, and be able to open the door here in Baltimore. So it was hard, but I was really, really happy that I'm having this opportunity to be able to, uh-oh. Did you lose me?
No, I'm here. We can hear you.
Okay, I was really happy to have this opportunity to be able to lead the Reginald F. Lewis Museum.
Well, Memphis's loss is our gain. So again, welcome, and to this new post. I want to touch a bit on your experiences at the National Civil Rights Museum. Again, the site of Dr. King's assassination. This public square concept, a safe place, where you discuss the painful issues of racism. We confront them, both past and present, and also the effects that continue to challenge our best efforts to bring about equity, opportunity, and to move forward those communities that frankly have been left behind for far too long. Give us a sense of where it was and what you accomplished, and how you'll bring that to the Reginald F. Lewis Museum. I can see you just fine.
I'm sorry, my computer just stopped on me. I don't know why.
Okay, did you hear my question?
No, I didn't. I heard public square. That's all I heard.
Well, I wanted you to touch on your experiences at the National Civil Rights Museum, what you accomplished there. It was a place of dialogue, of confronting the painful reality of racism past, but also present, and then what you hope to do, sort of translate that to the Reginald F. Lewis Museum.
Sure. So I really think that the days of museums, particularly museums that are history, culture museums, of just being places kind of where you go in, you look at stuff, you read things, you absorb it, and you leave. I think those days are over. I think that museums and libraries are some of the few public spaces where people can come in, actually interact with each other, interact with whatever is in those spaces, and learn. And they're places that don't really have an agenda, if you will. And so it provides the opportunity for people to connect, for people to ask questions. And when you have organizations like the Reginald F. Lewis Museum, that really is focused on a particular type of history and culture, it allows for people to ask the questions that need to be asked about that history, that culture. And given where we are in our society, I think that we need public places, public spaces, safe spaces, to have some conversations about what is very troubling, and continues to persist in our society around racism, white supremacy, issues of power, issues of equity. And so my goal has been, especially given that I am not a museum professional, I am a individual who has led a lot of organizations, and I have a passion for community. My goal is to make the museum a welcoming space where people, they do learn from the things that are on the wall, but they're inspired by those things to want to actually do something, right? So we can make our world a better place. And being able to then transform the space into a place where people have an opportunity to interact with each other, to interact with those that consider themselves experts in different topic matter, to ask the questions that you may not be comfortable asking in other forms that you're more comfortable asking in the museum setting. That, I think, is a really, it's really important, because until we have not just the conversation, but come to some understanding, acknowledgement, and say, okay, this happened, we're going to move forward from it, we're not going to get very far in our country.
Well, I'm interested, you referenced the sort of the current environment and current reality. I'm interested in your thoughts about all of that, what we've seen across our nation over the past few years in particular. We seem to be at a nexus in confronting issues of persistent racism and the wounds that clearly haven't been sufficiently addressed or healed. The mostly peaceful marches and demonstrations last summer following the death of George Floyd and Breonna Taylor were an indication that the country and a younger generation of Americans in particular just are no longer going to tolerate delay of equal justice, equal protection, and treatment under the law. So what do you again, I like your idea very much about the museum not being a sort of a static place where you go to look at things, but being sort of a catalyst as well for change.
So, with what has been going on in our country for many years now, I mean, it's just like if things are coming to a head, and I think probably January 6th of 2021 really put on display the systemic racism that exists in the country. People get hung up on the fact that they'll say, well, I'm not racist. Well, you may not be, but the systems that we operate within have a historic connection to race, because that is what the country was founded on. The country was founded on the fact that there was free labor that would allow to us to build this nation. And so when we were able to watch the treatment, and many media outlets called it out, actually, the treatment of those who rioted on the Capitol on January 6th, as compared to those who were peacefully protesting in the streets of our cities after the George Floyd murder. There were two distinct approaches to those incidents, one of which was a protest, the other of which was a riot. And the one that was the riot actually had an easier way of it than those that were protesting. These sorts of issues have presented themselves throughout all of our various systems. Mm-hmm. And one of the things that I believe is helpful is that if people understand the history and why things are the way they are. Why are our communities segregated? Because the government set it up that way years and years and years ago. Why do we have issues with policing in our communities? Because police forces came out of the idea of making sure that enslaved people were kept in their place. So we have to understand these things to know why we are in the places that we are in today. I believe that going back, we look at the history, we talk about where we are, and then we try to figure out, okay, so what's the way forward out of this? And unfortunately, when I was at the National Civil Rights Museum, people always talked about how much they loved Dr. King and how great King was and how much of a pacifist he was. And I used to have to explain to people that in 1967, 1968, Bernice King, his daughter, said Dr. King was the most hated man in America. So many people can look back on history with rose-colored glasses. When you're living it, like we are now, it doesn't look so good. No. We have to be willing to recognize that sometimes we rewrite history. Our goal at museums is to tell the truth and to make sure that people understand what the history has been and make sure that the document is being written today the way it should be, because today is history tomorrow, right? So we want to make sure that we're ensuring that the record is accurate.
Are you dismayed? If you think about it, in so many ways, it feels like we haven't moved as far along as we think. And again, the turmoil of the last several years, the blatant demonstrations in Charlottesville of white supremacists, counter demonstrations to the Black Lives Matter movement, and of course, as you referenced, the assault on the Capitol by the likes of Proud Boys. All this after 2 terms of the first African-American president, who was transformational figure for sure. I think we would all agree. And now the first woman and African-American Asian Indian vice president. So on one hand, it's clearly a period of great progress, or what it should be, and we've hoped it would be all along, and yet we still see all of this. I struggle to sort of make sense of that.
So yes, progress has been made. Absolutely. We've made tremendous progress. I am able to be a member of the Center Club. I am able to sit here and be at the helm of the Reginald F. Lewis Museum. We were able to have an African American president, and now the first woman of color who is a vice president. But we should have gotten a clue into what was still happening when President Obama was giving a State of the Union address and someone hollered out, "You lie." Right. That was the signal right then. Never before had a president had anyone be so disrespectful in the middle of the State of the Union. We should have had a clue when there was this assault on his nationality. These are things that most, I would say, African Americans realized, yeah, we put him in office, but the underlying attitudes around what can be and or what is and what can be, there can be a big difference. And I am encouraged, though. I will tell you, I'm encouraged because young people have pretty much said, no more, we're not doing this. And this kind of confluence of things that has occurred with COVID, keeping people home, and George Floyd, his death, along with several other instances, this confluence gave people an opportunity to come out and say, this isn't right. We can't continue to move forward in this direction. In fact, we're not moving forward at all. We're moving backwards. And young people of all races, ethnicities, sexual identities came out and said, you know, human life is important. And if in fact we think that all lives matter, then you can't believe then that Black lives don't matter. And so I am encouraged by young people who have decided we're taking a stand and they're not going to let it go. I know a lot of people think, okay, everything has died down. They're not going to let it go. And it doesn't take much for things to kind of set off again if we're not actually trying to come up with some solutions to these issues of systemic racism and inequitable distribution of wealth and power in our country.
Yeah. Well, it's been now 15 years, right, since the Reginald F. Lewis Museum was founded. Give us some perspective, if you will, about the man whose name and person are now immortalized by this great cultural asset of Baltimore. Remind us.
So just an incredible example of what can be in this country. He born in East Baltimore and was persistent in making sure that he moved forward, was a lawyer, an entrepreneur. In 1993, now think about that, in 1993, named one of the richest Americans with 400 million, a net worth of $400 million in 1993, and then went on to build a $1 billion company in Beatrice Foods. And prior to his death, he made known that he was interested in having a museum, something that would document these opportunities that people could have. And so the museum was established. I would say this, it's important for young people to see that this can happen. You don't have to be born into it, right? You can work for it. It does take some hard work. And I think that what Reginald F. Lewis shows us is that with hard work, with persistence, and just, you know, doing what you have to do, being a boss, if you will, you can definitely achieve greatly in this nation. But it's not easy. It is not easy. And we shouldn't fool ourselves to think that because one person did it, it's easy for other people to do it. It can be done, but it requires effort. And so what we want to do is hold up the example of Reginald F. Lewis and how he was able to accomplish so much in such a short period of time. You consider how old he was when he died, a short period of time, and really let young people know success can be in your future, but you got to work toward it. One of my favorite quotes from Reginald F. Lewis, and I'm paraphrasing, is, "Don't mistake what you're receiving with what you deserve." And I think that's really important for young people to keep in mind. You deserve more, and you shouldn't mistake that with what is just being given to you. Always push for more.
Let's spend a moment more on the youth angle. I'm sure you would agree that so much of what we're hoping to accomplish and move toward in these areas, especially depend on our young people being engaged, but also us providing them pathways and the prospect to change the trajectory of their lives. Those especially who otherwise might be inhibited by these systemic failings. So what should the Reginald F. Lewis Museum say to them, mean to them, be for them?
I think one of the challenges that all museums have is to bring to decrease the average age of their visitorship. We have to be able to bring young people into these spaces. That means there's a certain type of programming, certain types of exhibits, certain types of events that we need to have that will draw them in and allow them to feel like the space is not their grandparents' space, but it's their space. I have 2 millennials and 1 Gen Z, and they are different. And we thought millennials were different. Gen Z is really, really different and very, very motivated to do things that are going to be beneficial to the broader society. So what we want to do is engage them to be participants in the museum, but we really want to engage them to actually be helping do the work of the museum, because they're going to have to carry on these legacy institutions, but they have to mean something. Young people are not going to allow us to just kind of do it the way we always have. They're not interested in that. They're interested in something that is a lot more active, a lot more experiential, and something that is going to actually have some benefit at the end of it. So I think what has traditionally been our approach to how we run some of our institutions needs to morph based on the fact that younger people, they're going to be here hopefully a little longer than I will be here, right? So we want to make sure that we bring them in and that we are assured that they will be able to move these agendas forward. Let me tell you, I often would tell people in Memphis, as we were dealing with young activists, that one of the issues that our young activists have is that sometimes our elders who have done so much, and I'm considering myself an elder at this point in time, but sometimes we have to know when we need to move out the way. Yeah. Sometimes we need to know when we are supporting and not directing, guiding and being a good coach, but not necessarily always being the parent. And that's a hard transition oftentimes. But I think that these young people have demonstrated in many ways that, they're in this for the long haul. And so we want to make sure that we are giving them a museum experience that is going to be beneficial and is going to draw them in. Because ultimately we want them to support too, right? We want them to be donors and givers to the museum of their time, their talent, and their treasure.
Yes, you're right. It has to relate to them. It has to speak to them. So let me give you a chance before we move to our audience, our participants that have joined us to ask questions and offer their own insights. Share with us, if you will, a bit about your upcoming plans and exhibitions. I know there are some 11,000 artifacts as part of your permanent collection. And of course, you have special exhibits, and one in particular has been inspired by a quote by the great civil rights leader and Congressman, the late John Lewis. So give us a little overview, and we'll move to audience participation.
Sure. Well, I will give everyone a taste, but I'm going to ask everybody to come down to the Lewis and visit us. This is your personal invitation to come in and visit the museum, but the permanent exhibition covers 400 years of Maryland history about African Americans. We have two changing galleries that are currently have exhibits in them. One that you referenced is the Good Trouble exhibit, which actually looks at, if you will, the art of protest, because it's based on the protest signs that came from various protests over recent years and protest paintings. And a part of what it shows us is that actually, I would say that the two exhibits that we have, the other exhibit that we have that's a changing exhibit is called Freedom Bound, which is about those enslaved people who were escaping and escaping to freedom. And I think the two are connected because both demonstrate this persistent resistance to oppression, right? Oppression in the 1800s, oppression in the 21st century. And that if there's one constant, there's always a resistance to oppression. And I think these two exhibits are a wonderful juxtaposition to show people that history museums don't always have to focus on what has happened in the ancient past, and that the ancient past has an impact, if you will, on the current past. And so I think it's a perfect time for people to come into the museum, again, to see the permanent collection and learn more about Maryland history, and also see these exhibits that are juxtaposed, one in the 1800s, one in the 21st century, both focusing on, in many ways, the same issue.
Excellent. Well,
the other thing, let me mention one other thing, if I might. This coming up this week, this Thursday, we're having our second annual African Americans in Healthcare Awards program, which is sponsored by Kaiser Permanente. And it's going to be a fantastic conversation. You can register on the website. It's going to feature a conversation between Dr. Freeman Rabowski, president of UMBC. Shout out that our youngest daughter graduated from UMBC this past December. And Dr. Kismikia Corbett, who is one of the lead scientists in the development of the Moderna vaccine, a graduate of UMBC, and an African-American woman. So this conversation is going to take place this Thursday. You can go on the website, lewismuseum.org, and you can register for that conversation. I think it's going to be a really, really good conversation.
Very quickly, and then we're going to move to so the museum, of course, during COVID is open.
Yes. Right? Yes, we are. We are on limited hours. We're open Thursday through Saturday, 10 to 5, and Sunday, 12 to 5. Those are what I'm calling the pandemic hours. Hopefully, the summertime will allow us to expand our hours and our visitorship. But I can guarantee you that if you come into the museum, you will be in a safe space. We have taken all the necessary protocols to make sure both guests and staff are safe in the space.
Great, great. Well, it's that time when we'd love to hear from our participants. And so I would invite those who have joined us to make yourselves known. If you have a question, there's a raise hand button, as you can see on the bottom of the screen, which I would encourage you to use. We're using a slightly different format than the, so Melody Thomas, if you can hear me, you may guide me a little bit, but Ann Carr has a question. So I'm going to go ahead and read that because I can't see everybody on this format. We had so many sign up that we had to shift to a webinar versus the usual Zoom. How do you explain, Terri, reconcile the myth of meritocracy the exception of the few versus the reality of the whole system of oppression that existed for centuries, and now the new Jim Crow?
Mhm. Well, it's difficult. I mean, I think first off, we have to help everyone understand where we really are. And one of the things that I try to implore people to understand is that simply because you haven't experienced it does not mean it isn't so. So we have to stop assuming that because our experience is different than other people's experience, that their experience for some reason is, it's an outlier. That just kind of doesn't typically happen. And I think we got a long way to go here because people, it is human nature to better understand things that you experience, right? If you experience it or someone close to you experiences it, that's when it becomes real to you. So I think we have to make real what is our circumstance and our environment. And we also must help people understand how much better off everyone will be when everyone's boat rises, right? Not just a few, not just a select few. And we do have to be cautious about holding up an outlier, if you will. They said, well, see, this person was able to do it. This person was able to do it. Well, what are we doing to ensure that other people are able to move ahead and move forward as well? And so I think this sounds really passive when I say that it takes dialogue, it takes education, it takes information, but it also requires those of us who understand these issues to hold people accountable, accountable in a way that doesn't necessarily antagonize, but accountable in a way that says you must understand this, because until you understand this, your reality isn't going to be as good as it actually could be either. So that's my thought on that particular issue.
I'm going to go to another question here, but a welcome back to Maryland, Terri. We are fortunate to have you and are thankful that you will be at the helm of the Reginald F. Lewis Museum, the Association of African American Museums. So
thank you,
Coleman Robinson. Thank you. Bernice Smoot asks, given how Black and white people working together has been and will be important to the success of Maryland and America, will the museum promote collaborating across color lines?
Absolutely. So we are the Reginald F. Lewis Museum of Maryland African American History and Culture. That doesn't mean the only people that should be in the museum are African American. And I think it's important that we understand that what we call African American history is really American history, right? It's history that we have signaled out because it's related to Black people, but it is American history. And I think it's important that all people have the experience of this information. How are we going to, just talking to ourselves isn't going to get us anywhere, right? My hope actually is that we'll develop programming that really encourages cross-cultural, cross-ethnicity opportunities for people to just come in, like I said, in safe spaces and begin to chip away at some of this stuff. Because until we confront these really uncomfortable, thorny issues, they're going to always be there. And we can try to hope that we'll have enough time in between these incidents that have been occurring in our society that we can kind of lose our memory. But that's not realistic. We're going to have to deal with it. So the museum is open to everyone. It's open to everyone.
Thank you. A couple questions. So one asks, Sheila Murthy, where do you want to see the museum in the next 5 to 10 years? And she thanks you for your leadership. But another question, probably you could combine these. What are some of the programming ideas you have for bringing in and engaging younger African Americans living in Baltimore City, particularly? Brian Morrison asked that. So
I think that there are issues around entrepreneurship that could be very attractive to young people. You know, we are the Reginald F. Lewis Museum. He was a corporate titan. We are living in an economy that is very much driven by the gig economy. It's driven by small business owners. It's driven by creatives. And many of those creatives are young. I would like to do more programming that engages them. I believe that arts and culture is what you look at, it's what you watch as well, and it's what you listen to. So I would love to encourage more opportunities for poetry in the space around a variety of topics. I think also giving young people an opportunity to maybe talk about, you know, things like education from their perspective, not always from the adult perspective, but from the youth perspective. But I do think that if we want to be true to the gentleman whose name is on this building, that we should really place some emphasis on business and what business looks like and how we can begin to make smaller the wealth gap by encouraging young people to get into entrepreneurial ventures. And there's so many incredible entrepreneurs here in Baltimore, but throughout the state and the nation, people who are actually in other locations now who are entrepreneurs, but they're from Maryland. So how do we get those voices back? The other thing that I would say is that, you know, to be able to engage thought leaders who are younger and who are talking about the issues that we're talking about right now, right? Issues of race and equity and power are really important and they're prevalent. Issues around the environment, environmental justice. There are so many young people who are in this space. And I think this is not to say that those people who are older don't have anything to contribute. I'm not trying to be ageist. In fact, I think having multi-generational opportunities is really, really beneficial because we're all here and we have to know how to relate to each other.
You mentioned poetry. Any plans to get that very remarkably talented Amanda Gorman? Would be great.
I'm not giving away any trade secrets, but I'll tell you, she's certainly on the list.
I suspect so. Lots of wonderful comments here welcoming you, and the Baltimore National, Shante Daniel says the Baltimore National Heritage Area would like to welcome Ms. Freeman to Baltimore. I hope we can work together to promote Baltimore's history to a new generation of residents and visitors, and that Black history is American history. So for sure. Give us somebody, Marcia Tuck asks, please give some examples how the church in particular can help the museum. Yes, on doing more for our amazing young people, business and building wealth. Well,
so I'm kind of close to that topic since my husband is a pastor. First off, I think it's important that the church be a part of this community that is the Reginald F. Lewis Museum. And I think that there are probably some opportunities in the future for us to even look at what types of potential exhibits could be developed from the church's contribution, not just here in Baltimore, but the church's contribution around the state of Maryland to African-American history and culture. You know, right now, if you look at how engaged many faith leaders are in this whole discussion around the COVID vaccine, they have access to people in their community. They are trusted. And they have an opportunity to really make a difference and help people better understand why this is important and why people should go ahead and consider getting this vaccine. And so I think what we should do when we're looking at our faith leaders is talk to faith leaders to see what would be important for them around what the museum can partner with them on, as opposed to just saying, this is what we want them to do for us. I really am looking forward to partnering with not just the faith community, but other community-based organizations to see how we might be able to, again, bring the museum to life and make it a living, breathing institution.
Well, that's perfect setup. Drew Hawkins asks, Terri, what are your biggest asks for individual and corporate America to help take the museum to that next level?
Well, we're a nonprofit. This is an easy one. We're a nonprofit that is operating in the midst of COVID, where our bread and butter, which is admissions, is down because we can only have so many people in the museum at a time. So we need people to give money to the museum. But not just give money, give time too. Volunteers are incredibly important. We have a system here of docents and volunteers that actually do a lot of the tours. So we want to be able to train more volunteers to be able to provide tours to people as they come into the museum. So I need individual givers to give of their treasure and of their time. And it doesn't, if you have, $500,000 that you want to give us, we will absolutely take it. But if you have $50 a month that you want to give us, we'll take that too. We would like everyone to become a member of the museum. And I know that most recently we have updated our membership benefits. And I can't tell you those off the top of my head. I've only been here, this is my 5th day. So I can't give you all the specifics. But what I can tell you is that if you watch this space over the next several months, several years, I guarantee you that there's going to be something for everyone at the Reginald F. Lewis Museum, but we're not going to be able to do it without resources. And so we need people to support the museum, and you can go online and you can find out how you can make contributions.
Terri, I know a lot of museums, different cultural institutions, even the Baltimore Symphony here in the community, has gone out, has left the confines of its building and out into the community. Do you envision the Reginald F. Lewis Museum doing that sort of outreach in your community, in your neighborhood sort of approach?
I do think that it's important for us to move beyond the walls. And you're speaking in neighborhoods. I'm thinking, we again are the Maryland Museum of African American History. We have to move beyond Baltimore City to the variety of counties in the state. But yes, being able to take this information to young people. I used to always joke when I was in Memphis that I wanted a bus that had exhibits on the bus that I could just drive through neighborhoods and really allow people to interact with the information that was on this kind of traveling, if you will, mobile exhibit. I don't know if I should be driving a bus through the neighborhoods, but I do think that we have to be able to partner with other organizations that allow us to bring the history to people, because it's not always realistic that people can come to the museum. Sometimes we have to move beyond the 4 walls of the museum.
Excellent. Somebody asks, and I think I know the answer to this question, but Maurice Taylor wonders if there are naming opportunities for individuals or corporations to support.
So sure, there are naming opportunities, but I think it's one of those areas that I need to have the opportunity to take a look at where we are now with the naming opportunities that have been provided and the levels at which we should acknowledge all donors to the museum. Again, I don't care if you give $50 or you give $500,000. We want to acknowledge the fact that you stretched and you gave a gift to the museum. But there are certain levels at which you would want prominent displays of people's support of the museum. And so I just have to spend a little bit more time figuring out what we have and where we can grow with that. Because I do think people do like to see their name, or they like to be able to sometimes gift something that has a person's name on it. Sometimes we get tired of getting Dad a tie for Father's Day. Maybe we can give Dad his name in something at the restaurant.
Not enough ties, right? You know, you think of the rich musical life that was that defined Baltimore and the African American community in particular. You know, the legends, Billie Holiday and U.B. Blake and all those that came. That Baltimore was the place to come. And I know that you've had an exhibition. But I think it's part of your permanent exhibition. I saw it last time. Wonderful. But how to highlight that? It seems it's such a vital part of our history in Baltimore, and yet I imagine the more we get on and further away from that era, the less aware people are, especially younger generations. You think of Pennsylvania Avenue there and that whole area, which now has seen a lot of revitalization in Station North. Do you see some that side of things, music and the arts and
absolutely. This is history and culture.
Yeah.
I see music, I see sport, I see fine arts, I see a lot of things. I think what's important is when you talk about those musical greats, to recognize that right now, this very moment, new musical greats are being created. Sure. How we bring them together so that they understand, they understand the history as they are developing their craft is really, really important. I am really about kind of taking the icon and connecting them to what I call kind of the new movement makers, or we can just call them the new makers in a lot of ways, and helping people understand that it didn't stop at a particular point in time. It continues on.
Timeless. Great. Well, have you even had a chance to unpack and get situated? You just landed here.
Yeah. Almost all the boxes are unpacked, believe it or not. Yeah, so we were almost there. Not too much art on the walls yet. They're just kind of laying up against the walls. They're not up on the walls, but we're getting there. And I was saying to my husband just last night, it just feels right that I'm here and that I'm back in Maryland, a state that I have called home for so many years. And I'm just really, really honored to be able to sit in this place, and I'm expectant, and I hope you all are as well, about what is to come for the Lewis.
Well, we have in the chat section, and I'm trusting the Center Club folks who do such a terrific job of organizing this. Melody Thomas and Nancy Sloan are capturing some of these comments, because a lot of people want to be involved. They want to volunteer. They want to be part of developing programming with you and making sure that the museum fulfills its great promise under your leadership. So I guess we need to.
I would love to see those come. They pop up. I'm not quick enough to read and talk to you at the same time, but I would love to see those comments.
Because it really is about that, and that's I think that's so much of Baltimore's richness, is this desire to be to engage and to help these great organizations, these institutions succeed. And of course, a lot of excitement given that you represent a new era, a new beginning for the museum. So you've been terrific in lending your time with us, and I hope everyone will seize the opportunity to get to the Lewis Museum and soon, if they haven't, and be part of it and stay connected to it as you begin to put your mark on the museum in Baltimore and actually to your point, the greater Baltimore region, which
Right.
Maryland. Yeah.
Right. Right.
Yeah.
Thank you,
For
Greg.
sure.
And this again has been great. And thanks to the Center Club for doing this.
For sure. And I might add, the Center Club, we always proudly tout, it was established in 1962 as the only club that was fully integrated.
Right.
From the beginning. It wasn't something that later happened. And so it's in a place where, regardless of race and religion, sex, you could be a member. And so it's something.
And I'm happy to say that I am a member of the Center Club. So
great. Well, to all of you who've joined, thank you. Again, this will be available on the YouTube link as part of the CenterView collection, the playlist. Next month, I'll be welcoming our mayor, Baltimore's mayor, Brandon Scott, on Monday, April 22nd, to review and discuss his first 100 days as Baltimore's 52nd mayor. So put that on your calendar, Monday, April 22nd at 5 p.m., just like this hour here. So again, thank you, Terri. All the best to you and great success. I look forward to seeing you at the museum, hopefully very soon. And thank you to everyone.
Thank you.
All right. Till next time.